Okay, good day, Gregory or Saint Gregory. So today we will just continue the discussion that we were not be able to finish last meeting. Okay, so last meeting we stopped with the part wherein I am discussing ballad. So again, let's just have a short recap about ballad. So when we speak of ballad, this is a type of poem under the lyric poetry. So just like any other types of lyric poetry, a ballad is also written to be sung. So meaning you need to sing it in front of your audience. It can be delivered in the usual way of delivering a poem, but most of it were delivered in a song like performance. Okay, so a ballad features the adventure and romance of the persona or of the character of this poem. It talks about love. So most of the ballads that you will encounter will be sad or somehow tragic, but not all of it. Okay, some ballads contain humorous or funny situations. Okay, so not all of it is sad or somehow tragic. Okay, so the adventure that we are talking about in this type of poetry is not like in epic, wherein the characters or the personas in the poem travels a lot or transfer from one place to another. The adventure that we are talking about in this form of poetry is the adventure of confessing or the adventure of expressing the emotions of the persona to the other personas in the poem. Okay, so that's ballad. It has melody. And then the next type of poem that we will be talking about is a soliloquy or soliloquy. So it can be pronounced in either way. Soliloquy or soliloquy. So a soliloquy or soliloquy is a monologue. So meaning the character or the persona in this type of poem is alone. Okay, so in which a character or the persona speaks to him or herself. So the persona in this type of poem is talking to no one. So meaning wala siyang kausap. So the persona is expressing his or her inner thoughts that an audience might not otherwise know. So meaning we are performing soliloquy in order for the audience to know what is the reason behind the characteristic or the situation of us in the poem. So again, in this type of poem, we are talking to no one. So we don't talk to the other personas in the poem. We are also not talking to the audience. So we are there to express our emotions or thoughts. Okay, so that is soliloquy. Soliloquy is under the form dramatic poetry. So meaning it requires action, it requires performance. So that makes soliloquy different from the other types of poetry. So the next type of or the next part of the lesson is actually not part of it originally. So I just decided to include it so that somehow we can save these kinds of poetry. Okay, so I will be presenting three traditional poetries or three traditional Filipino poetry or poems that are somehow considered dying. So meaning less Filipinos use this kind or write this kind of poem. So let's start with a Tanaga. So Tanaga is a traditional type of Filipino poem. It is short. Okay, so if you will be looking at examples of this type of poetry, it is short. It has 4 lines per stanza, and each line must have 7 syllables. So meaning it is a numbered poem. So we need to have that specific number of syllables per line. So a Tanaga also use rhyme at the end of each line. So meaning you may use the different rhyme schemes that we have discussed during our last meeting. Okay, so here's an example of a Tanaga. So, katitibay ka tulos sa kalingdat ng agos, ako'y mumunting lumot, sa iyo'y pupulupot. So, this example uses a sunuran rhyme scheme. So, we have here AABB pattern. Okay, so if you will be counting the number of syllables, you have 7 syllables per line. Okay, so that is a Tanaga. A Tanaga may talk about anything. So you may have different topics if you will be writing this kind of Filipino poem. Okay, so the second traditional Filipino poem is a Dalit. So just like Tanaga, it also uses rhyme scheme or rhyme. You have a rhyming syllables at the end of your lines. You also have 4 lines per stanza. Okay, so the only difference is that in Dalit, you have 8 syllables per line. So we have an extra syllable for each line. So if we will be comparing it to Atanaga. So just like Atanaga, a Dalit may talk about anything. So you may talk about nature, you may talk about your thoughts, you may talk about your emotions, you may talk about anything. Okay, so that is a Dalit. So here's an example of a Dalit. Ang sugat ay kung tinanggap, di daramdamin ang antak, ang aayaw ay at ang may I repeat it. Okay. Ang sugat ay kung di tinanggap, di daramdamin ang antak, ang aayaw at di mayag, galos lamang magnanakngak. So, if you will be counting the number of syllables per line, we have here 8 syllables, and it uses the ABCB rhyme scheme. Okay, or it has a pattern of ABCB. Okay, and then lastly, we have Diyona. So you may also spell it in Diona way. Okay, so Diyona, you will remove the Y. So either spelling is acceptable. So Diyona is a type of short Filipino poem. It has 3 lines in a stanza. So meaning we have tercet. Okay, so we are using tercet in this kind of traditional Filipino poem. And then each line has 7 syllables in it, and it also uses a rhyme or rhyme scheme. Okay, so in this example, we have, or we use, or the writer used a basic rhyme scheme. So meaning we have AAA as the rhyme scheme. So magkapatid mang buo, kung di kapwa suyo, parang pinsang malayo. So just like Dalit and Tanaga, a Diyona may talk about anything. Okay, so you may have different types or different topics if you will be writing your Diyona. So again, in Diyona, we only have 3 lines and each line has 7 syllables. So those are the 3 traditional Filipino poems that are considered dying. So again, I have decided to include it in this lesson so that we could somehow save them from dying, or save them from uh, forgetting this kind of poems. Okay, so this will conclude lesson number 2. Okay, so if you want to check the things that I have presented, you may check them on these links or references. So these are my sources. Okay, so if you have questions regarding this lesson, you may raise them on our GC. So this will be the end of lesson number 2. Thank you for listening. And again, I will be sending the video discussion of lesson number 3 on our GC. So thank you and see you on our next meeting.